It is important that pro-male men have their own frame of reference, otherwise they will unintentionally spread the ideas and memes of other movements, and a lot of these ideas are anti-male. My last video was about rejecting the toxic SJW label. Now this video is about a concept that is even more toxic, the false alpha and beta dichotomy. This concept must be rejected out of hand and never used at all by pro-male men. First, let's listen to a right-wing woman use the term beta as a pejorative.
And some people call this being picky. Some people call it being fickle, and many people on the right seem to think that hypergamy is generally not a good thing. I have even seen some men, usually of the MRA variety, calling for white Sharia in order to clamp down on female hypergamy. Clamping down on hypergamy is something that rape cultures do, and before you get triggered by my use of the word rape culture, know that I'm not using it in the feminist sense. A rape culture is not when college co-eds have drunken sex and regret it afterwards. A rape culture is when reproductive choice is taken away from women. Islam is a rape culture because the women have no say in when they marry, whom they marry, or how many times they get pregnant. These decisions are all taken away from them and given to the men. In the context of hypergamy, it's important to remember that not all sperm is equal. This might upset some beta male losers who live in fantasy land and like to pretend they have just as high a sexual market value as the alphas, but it's just the reality of the world we live in. Not all sperm is equal.
There, now let's listen to TFM with some of his tradcon woman worshipping buddies, waffle on about betas and cucks in a Twitch stream he did.
What are you going to do for reproduction? I mean, here's the thing. Once we have the artificial womb, sure, we want to fucking roid up all the women. I don't give a fuck because I can have kids with the artificial womb. I don't give a shit. Women can do whatever the fuck they want. I'm gonna have my sex bot and my artificial womb. I don't give a shit what women do at that point. If they want to roid themselves up and She-Hulk it up, I don't give a fuck. But until then, we still need women for babies. So,
well,
you know,
women have already solved that problem. You see, the manginas out there with low T, the beta cucks, they're the ones getting cheated on. They're the ones getting harassed. And the sad part about it is that there's a lot of them who understand that they are getting cucked out. And for some weird reason, they're like fucking okay with it. I don't understand that.
I don't know. I think.
Did you guys see the scale they had of all the BuzzFeed men showing what their testosterone levels?
Yeah, they were all super low T. Yeah,
I've said this many times, like years ago, about the tragedy of the cuck. Men don't become beta cucks because they woke up one day and decided to be beta cucks. They were basically dealt a shitty genetic hand. That's why they're beta cucks. They're not attractive. They're not rich because, they're not just unattractive. They're also lazy, have a shitty work ethic. They get tired and bored easily. They're basically women. They were born the wrong gender. They're very effeminate. It is what it is. So they have to be cucks in order to try, because they still are, unless they're gay, they're still attracted to women. They realize women want a masculine, good provider who's very dominant, and they're none of those things. So all they can do is try to be nice guys, and that's why they're cucks. I feel bad for them. And actually, this is why I think transhumanism is so important. Because if we could change our biology, then we're no longer restricted to it. So if you were born with a shitty genetic hand, if you could actually change that after the fact, that would be life-changing. Like these guys who, it can't be good. I can't imagine being a cuck and what that must be like. Just living your life with no respect for yourself, letting yourself get shit on, just so somebody touches your penis once in a while. It's like, I can't imagine how it must be to live that way. My heart would go out to them. The reason why I don't just open my arms up and give.
So turd-flinging monkey makes an assumption here, that only betas get cucked. I am sorry, but countless men that would be considered alpha get divorced and cheated on. By the way, does that mean you're a beta TFM? You have admitted to being cheated on by girls in your hangout with I am serious. Also, you said betas are lazy. Can you prove this assertion, TFM? Or is this just waffle pulled out of your ass? You seem to want to paint this narrative of worthless low-status men, unable to attract women, so they have to resort to craven despicable behavior. Perhaps you are projecting your own traits here, TFM. So if only weak betas get harassed by women, the implication is that they brought it on themselves by being weak, right? So when rich powerful men get harassed by women, are they betas? It seems to me the definition of alpha and beta is floating and has no fixed definition. This obsession with high testosterone alpha men, and low testosterone beta men, it just stems from the anxiety right-wing men have about themselves, their place in the pecking order. They seek to reassure themselves by lashing out at other men, using them as scapegoats. Of course, the fact that the term beta is used as a pejorative is not reason enough to reject the label. There are even more compelling reasons. I am not going to really analyze the waffle that comes out of TFM's mouth too deeply right now. It is just typical male-on-male bullying. I will link the video in the description. It is just the standard tradcon waffle and pseudoscience. I don't feel like debunking nonsense about women needing to work less than men. It would derail this video, and it is going to be long enough as it is. Can anyone deny that turd-flinging monkey is a blatant anti-male tradcon now? I suppose his cult followers can. I suppose I will get more comments from morons, telling me I am just jealous and bitter of turd-flinging monkey, because he has a higher sub-count. When I see men who use the term beta as a pejorative, to me that is a massive red flag. There is something off-putting about a cowardly male looking to lash out at other men, doing them down. Now let's look at an article about alpha and beta wolves.
Why everything you know about wolf packs is wrong. Lauren Davis. The alpha wolf is a figure that looms large in our imagination. The notion of a supreme pack leader who fought his way to dominance and reigned superior to the other wolves in his pack informs both our fiction and is how many people understand wolf behavior. But the alpha wolf doesn't exist, at least not in the wild. Although the notions of alpha wolf and alpha dog seem thoroughly ingrained in our language, the idea of the alpha comes from Rudolf Senkel, an animal behaviorist who, in 1947, published the then groundbreaking paper Expression Studies on Wolves. During the 1930s and 1940s, Senkel studied captive wolves in Switzerland's Zoo Basel, attempting to identify a sociology of the wolf. In his research, Senkel identified two primary wolves in a pack, a male lead wolf and a female bitch. He described them as first in the pack group. He also noted violent rivalries between individual members of the packs. A bitch and a dog as top animals carry through their rank order and as single individuals of the society, they form a pair. Between them there is no question of status and argument concerning rank, even though small fictions of another type, jealousy, are not uncommon. By incessant control and repression of all types of competition, within the same sex, both of these alpha animals defend their social position. Thus, the alpha wolf was born. Throughout his paper, Senkel also draws frequent parallels between wolves and domestic dogs, often following his conclusions with anecdotes about our household canines. The implication is clear: wolves live in packs in which individual members vie for dominance, and dogs, their domestic brethren, must be very similar indeed. A key problem with Senkel's wolf studies is that, while they represented the first close study of wolves, they didn't involve any study of wolves in the wild. Senkel studied two packs of wolves living in captivity, but his studies remained the primary resource on wolf behavior for decades. Later researchers would perform their own studies on captive wolves, and published similar findings on dominance, subordinate and leader-follower relationships within captive wolf packs. And the notion of the alpha wolf was reinforced, in large part, by wildlife biologist L. David Mesh's 1970 book The Wolf: The Ecology and Behavior of an Endangered Species. I'm linking it here, but please note that while the book has historical interest, some of its research is outmoded. Mesh spent several years during the 1960s studying wolves in Michigan's Isle Royale National Park as part of his PhD thesis work. Mesh's book echoed Senkel's notions of alpha wolves and competition-based pack hierarchies. Readers of Mesh's book were led to believe that dominance played a key role in the lupine social order, and that wolves were naturally inclined to dominate one another. And Mesh's book became a hit, It was republished in paperback in 1981 and remains in print, much to Mesh's chagrin, to this day. It popularized a lot of our modern ideas about wolves, including competition-based hierarchies. Although Mesh has since renounced the notion of the alpha wolf, he admits that if you've heard the term, it's likely thanks to his book. In more recent years, animal behaviorists, including Mesh, have spent more and more time studying wolves in the wild, and the behaviors they have observed has been different from those observed by Senkel and other watchers of zoo-bound wolves. In 1999, Mesh's paper Alpha Status, Dominance, and Division of Labor in Wolf Packs was published in the Canadian Journal of Zoology. The paper is considered by many to be a turning point in understanding the structure of wolf packs. The concept of the alpha wolf as a top dog ruling a group of similar-aged compatriots, Mesh writes in the 1999 paper, is particularly misleading. Mesh notes that earlier papers, such as M.W. Fox's socio-ecological implications of individual differences in wolf litters, a developmental and evolutionary perspective, published in Behavior in 1971, examined the potential of individual cubs to become alphas, implying that the wolves would someday live in packs in which some would become alphas and others would be subordinate pack members. However, Mesh explains, his studies of wild wolves have found that wolves live in families, two parents along with their younger cubs. Wolves do not have an innate sense of rank. They are not born leaders or born followers. The alphas are simply what we would call in any other social group parents. The offspring follow the parents as naturally as they would in any other species. No one has won a role as leader of the pack. The parents may assert dominance over the offspring by virtue of being the parents. While the captive wolf studies saw unrelated adults living together in captivity, related, rather than unrelated, wolves travel together in the wild. Younger wolves do not overthrow the alpha to become the leader of the pack. As wolf pups grow older, they are dispersed from their parents' packs, pair off with other dispersed wolves, have pups, and thus form packs of their own. This doesn't mean that wolves don't display social dominance, however. When a recent piece purporting to dispel the myth of canine dominance appeared on Psychology Today, ethologist Mark Bakoff quickly stepped in. Wolves, and other animals, including humans, display social dominance, he notes. It just isn't always easy to boil dominant behavior down to simple explanations. Dominant behavior and dominance relationships can be highly situational, and can vary greatly from individual to individual even within the same species. It's not the entire concept of wolves displaying social dominance that was dispelled, just the simple hierarchical pack structure. In response to the same piece, Mesh pointed to a 2010 article he published detailing his observance of an adult grey wolf repeatedly pinning and straddling a male pack mate over the course of 6.5 minutes. We interpreted this behavior as an extreme example of an adult wolf harassing a maturing offspring, perhaps in prelude to the offspring's dispersal. As research on wolves, both captive and wild, continues, we develop a more complex, nuanced picture of wolf behavior. But the easy notion of the alpha wolf still persists. Certainly in entertainment it has made for some nice stories. Plenty of books and movies center around the notion of wolf, and where wolf ranks. However, the outmoded idea of the alpha wolf still has some legs in a real-world area, dog training. Just as, more than 6 decades ago, Senkel extrapolated his wolf studies and applied them to domestic dogs, so too have many carried the notion of the alpha wolf over to dog training. Certainly, just as parent wolves hold dominance over their cubs and human parents hold dominance over their children, owners hold dominance over their dogs. Until my pup gets himself a credit card and a pair of opposable thumbs, and stops dissolving into delighted wiggles every time I tell him what a good little man he is, I'm pretty much the boss in our relationship. But some trainers take the idea of pack rank to the extreme. Dog owners are given a laundry list of rules of how to maintain alpha status in all aspects of their relationship. Don't let your dog walk through the door before you do. Don't let her win a game of tug. Don't let him eat before you do. Some famous trainers even encourage acts of physical dominance that can be dangerous for lay people to execute. Much of this is a legacy of those old wolf studies, suggesting that we're in constant competition with our dogs for that pack leader position. But, you might ask, mightn't domestic dogs behave much like wolves in captivity? Despite being members of the same species, wolves, even human-reared wolves, are behaviorally distinct from domestic dogs, especially when it comes to human beings. Take the famous experiment in which human socialized wolves and domestic dogs are both presented with a cage with food inside. The food is placed inside a cage in a way that makes it impossible for either wolf or dog to retrieve it. The wolves will inevitably keep working at the cage, trying to puzzle out a way to remove the food. The dogs, after a few seconds of struggle, will look to a human as if to say, "Hey, buddy, a little help here?" Even if the hierarchical ranks were some innate part of lupine psychology, dogs have behaviors all their own. Canine ethology is actually a very rich area of study. Researchers like Karen B. London and Alexandra Horowitz constantly contribute to our understanding of the domestic dog, and researchers like Mesh, who has an updated book, Wolves, Behavior, Ecology, and Conservation, continue to expand our knowledge of wild wolves. And perhaps someday, our popular culture will more closely resemble a modern behavioral science rather than the results of outdated research.
If there is no such thing as alpha and beta wolves in the wild, there is no way in hell I am going to accept the usage of the term, when applied to human beings. If wolf-pack studies that lead to the usage of the term were flawed, how much more flawed is it to apply the terminology to human beings? There is no such thing as alpha and beta human beings. Yes, categories can be invented and applied to a group with common characteristics. The problem with the alpha and beta male labels is the fact there is no agreed upon definition for them. The terms seem to have a floating definition. The definition changes, when convenient, all depending on who is using the terminology. The people who use the term can't seem to decide if there is such a thing as a natural genetic alpha and beta, or if being an alpha or beta male is linked to status. The terms alpha and beta, it comes with assumptions about a fixed human nature. I have no problems about theories about a fixed human nature per se, it is just that I expect those theories to be falsifiable. The use of the term alpha and beta seems to be fueled by circular logic. Harvey Weinstein, for example, I have seen him called a beta male. The implication being that he is only a victim of the recent sexual harassment hysteria because he is beta. So does that mean everyone who is accused of sexual harassment is a beta male? Do alpha males have the magic ability to not get charged with sexual harassment? In general, do only betas get victimized? So how does one prove he is not beta? By not being victimized? That is the very definition of circular logic. Not only that, the sort of person who buys into this logic loves to snort and ridicule men for being beta, laughing at them for their own victimization. Also, the logic behind being an alpha male is circular. What defines an alpha male? Someone who attracts lots of women. How does one attract lots of women? By being alpha, of course. Even if you are not a tradcon, the usage of the terms alpha and beta is going to be linked to a right-wing understanding of human nature. You will be then trapped in the tradcon frame of reference. You will be bogged down by the baggage and false consciousness of the tradcon alternative right. The concept of the alpha and beta male make no sense outside of a right-wing anti-male frame of reference. The right seems to believe in the myth of the genetic alpha male leader. It seems to stem from their simplistic understanding of history and human social dynamics. I suspect many of the men who buy into the myth of the socially dominant alpha male have had dysfunctional upbringings, and do not really understand how human social dynamics work. Their stereotypical views of leadership seems to conflate being a leader with being a hyper-masculine bully. who uses the alpha and beta terminology, who appropriated the terms from animal studies and applied it to human beings. The terms alpha male and beta male are primarily used by the red pill community. The red pill community includes various factions of the alternative right, pickup artist community, and the various tradcon factions of the anti-feminist community. Also, I have noticed the usage of the terminology has spread to the more mainstream right wing. The terms alpha and beta males seem to have their origins in the PUA/game community. Game is a type of PUA that is basically the cargo cult of dating advice. PUAs believe that confidence and faking high status can attract women. This is not the case at all. High status men are confident because they attract women. The confidence itself doesn't create the attraction in women. The PUA community basically get cause and effect back to front. It is like thinking that positive thinking can make you a millionaire. Copying the thinking patterns and habits of a millionaire will not make you a millionaire. In other words, millionaires think positively because they have a good life. Their positive thinking did not magic up money out of thin air for them. The PUA community uses the concept of alpha and beta males to create a simplistic false dichotomy of men who can attract women, and men who can't. It borrowed the term alpha and beta from Wolfpack studies, to give the PUA a scientific vernier. PUA is pseudoscience at its most manipulative. The alpha and beta terminology is designed to cause male anxiety. This makes the men who buy into the whole alpha and beta dichotomy more susceptible to the PUA, more likely to buy into their bullshit. Some of the most effective forms of advertising play into the insecurities of their target demographic. If men are worried that they are beta and therefore sexual marketplace losers, they will do anything they can to become an alpha, winners in the sexual marketplace. This includes paying money for seminars, or worthless products that are nothing more than placebos at best. The PUA community can be a gateway to some dangerous products, like chemicals and hormones, for men anxious about being beta due to a low testosterone count. There is no need to worry about being an alpha male or beta male, as there is no such thing. All these measures men take to become more alpha are a waste of time. Men are needlessly suffering from anxiety, due to this toxic concept of alpha and beta males. How does one define an alpha? Are alpha men natural alphas, naturally able to attract women? Does that make them genetically alpha? Naturally superior to other men? Or is it based on social status? Are alpha male higher status due to their superior genetic makeup? I ask these questions because it seems the people using the term haven't seemed to made their mind up on the subject. The people who use the term alpha and beta do not seem to even understand animal behavior, never mind the more complex behavior of human beings. How they use the term alpha and beta doesn't even apply to most animal species. For example, most PUA cultists seem to think the alpha just dominates others and takes resources from them. This is not true. Animal behavior is not as simple as that. For example, alpha chimpanzees give out food to subordinate chimps, to try and win approval from the group. Yes, chimpanzee males can be violent towards each other in intra-group competition, but to think that chimpanzee hierarchies are just about the alpha dominating, and bullying everyone else is wrong. In a lot of animal species, it is the elder animals that are in charge. For example, the alpha chimp has to be skilled in conflict resolution, stopping other chimps from fighting. Elder animals tend to be a lot better at avoiding pointless intra-group conflicts than younger animals. The position of alpha within a group is something that is fought for by animals. There is no genetic alpha in animals. There are certainly no genetic alphas in human males. Younger animals often have to fight to displace older ones. In almost every single human society, it tends to be elder humans who are the ones who rule. Anyone who has even a basic understanding of history and anthropology would realize that the right-wing concept of the alpha male leader doesn't really apply to human beings. Also there seems to be this misconception that alphas have an easy life. The alpha of an animal group not only has to face violence from within the group, but violence from other outside animal groups. While I am talking about animal behavior, I would like to point out that this notion that alphas cuck betas is nonsense as well. I don't know where this obsession with alphas cucking comes from. Cucking is a sexual strategy often done by beta animals. Cucking is a sexual strategy often done out of desperation, by animals denied mating opportunities by alpha animals. People banging on about cucks is another red flag to me. It just seems to be men working themselves up about other men taking women away from them. This leads to even more male-on-male hostility. Also, I have noticed, when convenient, the narrative will suddenly change to sneaky betas cucking the alphas. It seems like these right-wing morons can't make up their minds. Basically the way the alpha and beta dichotomy is used, it is just simplistic shit. Simplistic shit that is completely wrong. Now why has the alpha and beta meme spread so fast, and been accepted so completely by the red pill community? The concept of the alpha and beta male is so blatantly false. Why do right-wing men love using the terminology? I believe the answer to that question is very simple indeed. The reason is because the whole alpha and beta dichotomy appeals to a rigid right-wing mindset. The right-wing mindset looks for stability, within a fixed rigid frame of reference. Even though human behaviors are vastly more complex than animal behaviors, right-wing men love boiling things down to simplistic concepts. They use these simplistic concepts as a frame of reference to answer everything. It is just a crutch for their lazy thinking and prejudices. Also people love to think in simplistic dichotomies, left versus right, good versus evil, etc. This alpha and beta concept is a simplistic dichotomy, another reason to be very suspicious of it. It is also used as an lazy thought-terminating cliché. For example, someone could ask, why is that man being victimized? Why? Because he is a beta, of course. Another example being, why is that man getting all the women? Why? Because he is an alpha, of course. The alpha and beta concept seems to kill original thought. Most alternative right-wingers believe in a natural rightful hierarchy, and that civilization is in decline because of egalitarianism. They believe left-wing politics has ruined the natural order and made civilizations degenerate. So these people will be predisposed to believe in a made-up pseudo-scientific categories of male Homo sapiens. It is very similar to how right-wing racists believe in pseudo-scientific nonsense about race. The right believe in natural winners and losers. If someone is poor, it is because they were meant to be that way. They are naturally lazy and stupid. If someone is rich, that means they earned it, and therefore deserve it. This is the just world fallacy. They seem to be under the delusion that this is how the world worked in the past. The typical right-winger has a false nostalgia about history. Let's look at the example of a king who rules a nation. Was the king in power because he earned it? Nope, most kings in the past gained power due to the fact the title of king was hereditary. It is not like a king is king because of his superior aristocratic genetics. If you asked a king in the past why he ruled and peasants were peasants, he would tell you that it was naturally so, that it was in the nature of kings to rule, and it was in the nature of peasants to toil the land for their feudal lords. So in other words, he wouldn't answer the question. He would basically just choose a lazy thought-terminating cliché. Very similar to how the alpha and beta terms are used as thought-terminating cliché. Lazy thinkers tend to think alike. Of course, if the same king was born into a peasant family instead of an aristocratic one, he would have been a peasant toiling the land, not a king. It is obvious that the behaviors of different classes and castes are socialized into the members belonging to them. This is very obvious indeed. The fact many right-wingers fail to grasp something so obvious, shows you how wonky their thought process is. Human status and power is contextual. A worthless, stupid, unfit ugly imbecile can have high status. Therefore he can get access to women. A highly attractive male can have low status, and be sexless. Let's look at the classic rag to riches story of Adolf Hitler. At one point, Adolf Hitler was a down-and-out bum. When he lived in Vienna, he sometimes worked as an underemployed artist, often criticized by his employers for being lazy. I highly doubt Hitler was slaying much pussy back then. He was most likely either visiting prostitutes or was completely sexless. Later on, when Hitler gained power, women were throwing themselves at his feet, screaming and going hysterical over him. The women were acting that way because he was high status. In fact, Hitler's Nuremberg rallies were like rock concerts. If you asked the women at the time why they found Hitler so attractive, I am sure they would come up with rationalizations like, he is so handsome, he is so mysterious, he has a natural charisma, blah, blah, blah. Of course, if these women had met Hitler back in the 20s when he was a bum, they would have most likely reacted with disgust if he approached them. Hitler wasn't some genetic alpha male, that much is clear. Hitler also didn't gain power by throwing his personal weight around, beating up people like a thug. He won power by appealing to the masses and being popular. In the past, Roman emperors have displayed dysfunctional behaviors that would get them ostracized or even killed if they were a normal person, yet they were worshipped as gods. Meanwhile, all over the Roman Empire, in the Colosseums, the sort of people that would be considered alpha by the red pill community were getting thrown to the lions and being forced to fight to the death. You can't seriously argue that the Roman emperors had a different genetic makeup from the rest of society. How they were treated as emperors has nothing to do with their genetics. The concept of emperor was an intrasubjective concept. It was a title granted by social consensus. It doesn't matter how alpha a Roman emperor was, if the power brokers behind the scenes wanted him gone, the Roman legions, he was gone. If you asked a right-wing person in the past why slavery exists, he would claim that some people are just natural slaves. Of course, the slave was an intrasubjective category of human being enforced by social and legal custom. The right-wing person, wanting to justify the status quo, wouldn't even consider that, and would just commit an lazy appeal to nature fallacy. An intersubjective concept is something that only exists in the shared human consciousness. It doesn't exist outside it. You could have a genetically fit person born as a slave. Meanwhile, the sort of person that the typical right-winger would consider degenerate could be powerful. If you want some classic examples of that, look up the Roman emperors Nero, Caligula, and Claudius. I highly doubt that Caligula and Claudius were the epitome of high testosterone alpha males. The point I am trying to make here is simple: the alpha and beta male concepts are worthless when you try applying them to history. Human social dynamics are just too complex to be broken down into alpha and beta. Alpha male rules, and beta male is ruled, is just too simplistic, and is a belief driven by right-wing ideology, not any accurate understanding of reality. A large section of the alternative right community advocate for a return to monarchy, or feudalism. I am sure they are not even aware of what they are really advocating for. To return to the old ways, you would need to change the economic system, and undevelop it, something that is not happening anytime soon. The alternative right hate egalitarianism. They whine about it all the time, yet they seem to hate their results of the unequal power balance between men and women. Society is more unequal than ever in a lot of ways. For example, the wealth gap between the rich and poor is larger than ever, and the equality gap between the sexes seems to be growing larger as well. So we are not exactly choking on egalitarianism right now. The alternative right consider the old ways better. What do they mean by better? Were the societies of the past with their more rigid class and caste systems more efficient than the modern societies of today? Let's look at the world's first monarchy, the state of ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt was a rigid hierarchical society. yet it was very inefficient. You had the Egyptian pharaohs who had such massive egos, that they built massive monuments to their vanity, tombs, so they could live forever in the next world. Meanwhile, the average Egyptian suffered from all sorts of diseases stemming from malnutrition, and had a quality of life that would have been a lot lower than his hunter-gatherer counterpart of the time. The more egalitarian hunter-gatherer societies had a better quality of life for the people who lived in them. The archaeological evidence seems to point in that direction. The people who lived in early civilizations lived shorter lives, suffered more diseases, and had stunted growth compared to people who lived in hunter-gatherer societies. There are countless more examples I could give of how inefficient rigid hierarchical societies have been. Also, the people at the top of Egyptian society would have been considered degenerates by the typical alternative writer. They lived a lifestyle of decadence and luxury. Egyptian pharaohs married their sisters, and led wasteful lifestyles for the most part. In fact, the hierarchy that alternative writer pines for, is the hierarchy that leads to the very degeneracy they decry. This is not the only contradiction in regressive right-wing thought. A lot of the contradictions that you can point to in right-wing ideology stems from willful right-wing ignorance. For example, women now have more social license than men. Women can act in ways that would get a man locked up in jail. In our society, women are higher up on the social hierarchy, so they can take advantage of it and act in more degenerate ways than men. This is very similar to how the ruling aristocratic classes acted in the past. It is almost a universal rule that people higher up the food chain in a dominance hierarchy have more social license than people at the bottom. Kings and aristocrats led lifestyles that would be considered very degenerate by a right-winger. They had manners and customs that would be considered effeminate as well. Look at the paintings of the French kings of the past. If a modern right-winger saw someone like that prancing down the street dressed up in their wigs and long robes, they would snicker at him and consider him a faggot. You can't give one set of human beings power over another, giving them the right to live by a different set of rules to everyone else and not expect them to abuse it. It is not even abuse, it is simply taking advantage of what society allows them to do. Also, I think it shows a lack of empathy the typical right-winger has, to be honest. Monarchies stuck in a feudalistic stage of development fell because they were inefficient, and living under them as a peasant was pretty awful. Do they honestly expect people to meekly submit to that sort of thing? Do they expect people to know their place? The right bang on about how evil communism was, how authoritarian it was to live under all the time, and they are correct. But what I don't understand is, why do they go on about it? You could use right-wing logic and just go. People living under communism should have just known their place in the hierarchy. Society is more stable when people know their place. Also, doesn't this natural hierarchy nonsense in fact contradict the social Darwinist nonsense the alternative right love to sprout? If you believe in social Darwinism, that means you can't whine and complain when people overthrow the social order. If a social order can't survive, that means it has failed under the terms of the own social Darwinist worldview. A person who holds a belief in a stable rigid natural order, and social Darwinism, is holding contradictory beliefs. Oh, look, yet another contradiction in right-wing thought. I can pick out countless more. I can now see why Jordan Peterson waffles on about the need to accept contradictions in human thought. Is he apologizing for right-wing nonsense like this? I am not even talking about views that different right-wingers hold. Often these contradictory views are held by the same people. I have seen right-wingers contradict themselves in the same sentence. The alternative right crying about communism seems to be crying crocodile tears to me. They are just upset that they are not living under the particular rigid authoritarian set they advocate for, that is all. They just see communists are a rival gang of authoritarians, who are blocking them from setting up society how they want to. Also, to be honest, communists are not really relevant these days. They are not really in power anywhere, except China, and China is now capitalist. I wonder why the right sees communists everywhere. It seems to me right-wing thought is all over the place, and contradicts itself all the time. It just seems to be one big mess to me. It is not surprising to me that they use the alpha and beta terms in a contradictory way, often with circular logic. Human civilization has been rapidly changing since the start of the agricultural revolution. This change has gotten even more rapid since industrialization. This belief in natural order may have been an effective coping mechanism for humans in the past, when the world did seem unchanging, but that outdated belief is now completely useless and counterproductive in the modern age. Any political or ideological group that believes in a natural order and rigid roles for people is not going to achieve very much in the real world. The whole alpha and beta dichotomy is just the belief in the natural order, given a pseudo-scientific repackaging. Right-wing nutjobs will derail the conversation. They will decry the results of women being higher up in the social hierarchy, and being able to bully men on a collective level. Then they will claim that egalitarianism is to blame. For example, feminists dominating universities using the rhetoric of flax egalitarianism, but their actions are not egalitarian. Women, having more social power than men, can get them kicked out of universities, and marginalize men even more. These women can sprout feminist hate speech against men with impunity. Also, women are subsidized and given more resources than men. Women are privileged, men are underprivileged. This is not a problem of too much equality, but not enough. In fact, using right-wing logic, you could argue that men should know their place in the social pecking order, that rigid social hierarchies are good. So if right-wing men love their rigid social hierarchies so much, why don't they shut up about feminism? And accept their role as a second-class human being compared to women? The fact we do not have egalitarianism, and the gap between the rich and poor is getting wider, never mind the gap between men and women. Blaming our problems on egalitarianism is blaming our problems on something that doesn't really exist within a capitalist gynocentric society. In fact, thinking about it, I see a lot of hijacking going on. People in the MGTOW community now tend to talk about the problems caused by egalitarianism, when the problems men face are due to a lack of egalitarianism for men. Men whine about the special privileges women get. Then they claim that egalitarianism is the problem. Feminism make use of pseudo-egalitarian rhetoric, but you can't judge a political movement by its rhetoric. In fact, when right-wingers rail against feminists for being egalitarians, they are in fact helping feminism. They are giving feminist empty platitudes and lies plausibility. The feminists can point to the right-wingers and go, see, they are against the very equality we are trying to fight for and promote. It is hard enough trying to convince fence-sitters that feminism is not about egalitarianism, and that their claims are a lie, without a bunch of cookie right-wingers claiming that feminism is egalitarianism, and we must fight against it. All this talk about a natural order, rigid social hierarchy, the implication of that is that someone needs to be lower down on the pecking order, that they have to have less rights, and more responsibilities. I am sure the right-wing men who talk about a natural order assume that they are exiled alphas, waiting to take power, when the old natural order comes back. Yet what these idiots are doing are advocating for their own mistreatment without realizing it. Men are at the bottom of the pecking order socially. The more hierarchical and rigid a society is, the more men at the bottom suffer. Stupid right-wing men are calling for things to be made worse for men. I am not going to advocate for a natural pecking order. Who gets to decide who is at the bottom of it? If you want to advocate for that sort of thing, you should volunteer to be at the bottom of the pecking order yourself. Let's look at the term alpha male again. What does the term even mean? Does it mean a highly masculine man with a high testosterone count? If so, those sorts of men can be lower down on the social pecking order, while so-called unmasculine men can be higher up the social pecking order. If the term alpha means social status, Status is contextual, the examples I used from history should be proof enough. Human social dynamics are not as simple as right-wingers would have you believe. They believe in the hyper-dominant alpha male bossing people about and being in charge. Yet if you look at how society functions, it is almost always ruled by older people. Also, older people have lower testosterone counts as well. So all this anxiety about testosterone counts seems to be even more pointless. A lot of PUAs and alternative right-wingers seem to believe in the caricature of the hypermasculine bully, who pushes his weight around to show he is in charge. They think society functions better under leaders like that. This is a worldview that seems to come from badly socialized men, and is not in fact how the world works in reality. For example, leaders strive to be loved and liked. If a leader just tried dominating and bullying people too blatantly, he would end up dead. Also, leaders had groups of functionaries that they had to please. These functionaries were often the power brokers in society. One example I have already mentioned is the example of the Roman army. If the Roman army was displeased with the emperor in power, they would often get rid of him. Even one of the most repressive leaders in history, Stalin, was eager to be loved and liked by the masses. Yes, he relied on terror and fear, but even he wasn't too blatant about it. He produced propaganda that aimed to make the people love him. This simplistic picture of the man atop dominating and bullying other men to be in charge is highly inaccurate. It shows a complete lack of understanding of the nuance and complexity of human social dynamics on a macro scale. Applying terminology from animal studies to human societies is completely wonky and pointless. The terms alpha and beta do not work well as good descriptive language when it comes to human beings. To be honest, I think these people believe in this simplistic strongman narrative, simply because they dream of being strong men. They dream of being the strongman bully. Why do you think turd-flinging monkey waffles on about beta cucks and weak effeminate men all the time? The terms alpha and beta are anti-male. It creates a false anti-male frame of reference that is just as bad as the feminist one. The alpha and beta ideology is just the ideology of the wannabe strong man. It divides brother against brother. I want nothing to do with that toxic garbage. It is toxic and anti-male. MGTOWs have given it a pass, and not challenged it, simply because the strong man narrative appealed to a lot of anti-male MGTOWs. MGTOW is now flooded with men who are not trying to understand the world, but who are just posturing and trying to show others that they are strong men. These people are posturing for their own emotional gratification. These men are useless. I am not interested in self-absorbed men who just use MGTOW for therapy. The whole concept of MGTOW is garbage in fact, but that is for another video. Creating our own frame of reference is ultra important. The alpha and beta male frame of reference is the most toxic idea to float around male spaces online. Too many times, I have challenged people using the terminology, and they just reply, "Oh, you're just a beta loser. That is why you are disagreeing with the terms alpha and beta." These antisocial men are just projecting their own male anxiety onto me. They are not only projecting their anxiety onto others, they are using a frame of reference that allows them to look down on other men and feel better than them. The alpha and beta terms have to be rejected utterly by pro-male men. It has no foundation in science. It is used by PU con artists to market their bullshit. It is linked to a simplistic and false right-wing understanding of the world. And the terminology attract antisocial, anti-male bullies. The type of men who buy into that terminology have deep issues that they need to resolve. Pro-male spaces are not for these men to resolve them and get free therapy. That is all for now.